This is the
Five Stars
podcast.
Let me talk to you.
Hi.
So, what do you guys want to talk about? Tell me when I'm telling lies.
Thanks, guys. Back to you.
Well, I'm here. Physically, at least. We'll find out how mentally awake I am in a few minutes. I just got done finishing up some of my thoughts on that Survivor Series PLE. You always know it's a bad sign when I have to go back and retype stuff from the previous night. It just shows how mentally drained I am after having watched the show in its entirety. Like when I can't even finish my notes during the event. I have to shut my brain off for 8 hours before I can even think about it again. But I didn't drink. It's a good sign. I know I've had my fair share of alcoholic beverages during those AEW days. Those grand 5-hour pay-per-view slogs where I can literally see myself aging in the mirror as every match goes by. Those days are long gone, thankfully. Although Hunter's not tracking far behind Tony in terms of giving me mental fatigue. I'll get to Survivor Series in a sec here. Y'all know what show this is. It is the Five Starr Wrestling Report. Make sure you subscribe, comment, like the podcast if you have not already. We are here on YouTube and Rumble on Mondays and Fridays for new shows. It is the wrestling podcast nobody knows but everybody needs. And I'm always thankful to people that take time out of their busy schedules to at least give the show a listen. Even if you don't listen to the full 90-minute show. We're all audio-based here, so if you're somebody that likes to listen to podcasts when you work out, or maybe you're just driving or taking a walk, we make it simple here on the channel. No visuals needed. The way God intended. I wish I had better audio equipment, but you know how that goes. You say you're going to budget for some decent equipment. Try to be professional here. Then you proceed to put it off for another 3 years. Yeah. Procrastination. That's my gig. I don't want to procrastinate when it comes to my report on the Survivor Series show. I say we get this underway and hopefully not spend an eternity trying to make sense of it. So the annual WWE tradition continues. Even though they've completely butchered and neutered the entire concept of Survivor Series, they're still running the events all these years later. God, I remember going back several years ago and rewatching some of the highlights of those first couple Survivor Series pay-per-views. My, how times have changed. Long gone are the olden days of those traditional 5-on-5 elimination tag matches. Now they've substituted everything with these Wargames matches. Never thought the nostalgia of those traditional tag matches would have ever come into play again. But the more I see of Wargames, it's another gimmick concept that's been completely run into the ground. Then again, I've been saying the same thing about a lot of other gimmick matches in WWE. Whether it's the Rumble, Money in the Bank, the Elimination Chamber. Christ, they finally did away with the yearly Cell pay-per-view after all these years. How long did that take? A decade? The Wargames thing is just kind of another played-out concept that, I don't know. I guess they feel obligated to do it because it was one of Hunter's babies when he brought it back to NXT years ago. And while it does technically fit the theme of Survivor Series, is anyone else just kind of over Wargames in general? I mean, I was over Wargames back in 1987 when Dusty kept spamming it throughout the Bash Tour. Like, even if you want to argue this is a proper time and place to do a Wargames match, at least when it comes to the men, the women's match, that's a whole different conversation we'll get into momentarily. But even the whole OG Bloodline versus Bloodline 2.0 thing, as much as I'm a fan of some of the talent involved in that, did we really need to have a Bloodline Wargames match? I mean, I've said on several of the PLE recaps we've done, I'm kind of bored with the whole Bloodline saga. You know, they've tried to throw a few wrinkles in there to spice things up and keep the story moderately interesting. But on the whole, it's like, I mean, I'm yet to really understand what WWE sees in Solo Sikoa as any kind of ringleader or mastermind. Jacob Fatu's the only guy carrying that whole group. The rest of them are utterly useless. Sorry if you're a Gorillas of Destiny fan, but nah. They're mid at best. I obviously don't want to get too far ahead of myself because we're going to break down the match later on. I just really didn't have much of a vested interest in anything going on there outside the potential of what may come of the CM Punk involvement. Because there was that clip they aired on the Go Home show where Punk was saying he wasn't teaming with Roman as a favor to him. It was a favor to Paul Heyman. And that Paul's going to owe Punk one after the fact. So that at least gives you an idea of Punk's headspace. And I do like the hint of them teasing something with Roman and Punk for later on, even if it doesn't come into play immediately. Before we get to all that, though, quite frankly, the only match on this entire show worth giving a crap about in the grand scheme of things. We do have to at least try to cover some of the other stuff. And can we just be upfront from the beginning here? Let's do away with all the misogyny comments and immediately conceding to the feminine imperative like society so often loves to do these days. Aside from the fact that they're biological females and have vaginas, why the hell did there need to be a girls' Wargames match on this fucking card? Can anybody answer that to me objectively? Even if you want to argue there's a story reason for what's been going on with Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley, a feud, by the way, that's apparently been going on since God found the Garden of Eden. What facilitated them needing to do a 5-on-5 Wargames match here? Especially with some of the girls they booked in this fiasco. At least Rhea's team had some credible star power to it. I mean, I'm okay with Bayley, Bianca, and Io Sky. Naomi, I can take or leave, honestly. But my God, Liv's team. You want to talk about the run to the litter. Nia Jax, Candice LeRae, Tiffany Stratton, and Raquel Rodriguez. I mean, dude. Did all the other girls miss a plane flight or something? That was the best you could do for the heel team? That's a fucking D-level team if I've ever seen one. Oh, by the way, whoever that new female ring announcer was that did a horrible job trying to impersonate Samantha Irvin, -5 stars. Terrible performance. And I've been on record saying I was never a fan of Samantha Irving's ring announcing, but at least she had personality. This grungy chick sounded fake and phony beyond belief. She actually sounded like she was trying to pass a kidney stone. I mean, this whole match was horrible, but the first 5 minutes of this thing was really the whole story. Holy fucking shit, this is brutal to watch. I mean, God, what do you even say? Beyond the fact that everything looked like it was happening at a glacial pace. I love the great camera work where you could clearly hear Bayley call elbow strike. It's not even like she was screaming it too. She was using her library tone to call the move. Just elbow strike. Right in front of the fucking camera. Oh, and of course, let us not forget, the geniuses that agented everything that happened in this match. Somebody apparently made the brilliant call to have the baby faces have the team advantage in Wargames. Because that makes fucking sense, right? Why wouldn't you want to cheer for the bad guys having to fight an uphill battle the entire time? I guess while I'm reading through some of my snarky comments here, they also utilized weapons in this match, because of course they did. It's a yearly ritual. They've always got to put a hat on a hat by adding weapons inside a cage match, because the cage is never enough. And of course, they're just, standard run-of-the-mill gimmicks you'd always expect to be hanging out under a ring. Toilet seats, rainbow-colored kendo sticks, trash cans. I can at least give them a pass on the fire extinguisher. I like how Candace spent like 5 fucking hours walking around to try to find something they hid under the ring. Then she just gave up and got in the cage because she couldn't find what she was looking for. Fucking pea brains. You always notice how the referees never give a shit either. They just let people bring weapons into the ring and don't even try to stop them. Because they're all incompetent buffoons. And because none of these idiots even think about this kind of stuff. And all the fans are low-level IQ morons. So it doesn't even cross their minds. All this does is make the talent look stupid. Because instead of them trying to get in the ring to help their partners, or God forbid, even the odds, that is, the goal is to win Wargames, correct? Now they just rather waste minutes at a time bringing weapons into the ring while everybody just sits around waiting for their next cue. I mean, seriously, am I the only one that ever thinks about this kind of stuff? The fact that the fucking babyfaces are wasting daylight trying to bring in weapons instead of getting into the ring and trying to fight the bad guys. You would never even think about this kind of stuff back in the 80s. Wouldn't even been a blimp on the radar in anybody's minds. Because bookers and promoters weren't that stupid. I mean, I guess it really didn't matter since they had the brilliant call of having the good guys have the team advantage here. Because did I mention, these people are idiots. So among many of the other dumb things that happened in this match, after Io fucked up a powerbomb spot off the cage where she lost her grip on Candice, well, first she laughed about it. Then she just did something to Candice to knock her off the cage and then hit her with a missile dropkick or something. I mean, it is the selling point of all Wargames matches in 2024. It's not about the story of the girls and guys wanting to get revenge for previous wrongdoings and bad blood. It's all about stupid car wreck spots and meaningless high-risk flash reels. Because everything about modern wrestling is dumb. So as we make our way through this interminable pre-match garbage, because keep in mind, the match doesn't officially begin until everybody's in the ring. Eventually it breaks down into a sloppy brawl where half the girls weren't even throwing convincing punches. Somehow, despite the babyfaces having the clear-cut advantage, they were still getting their asses kicked by the heels, who were outnumbered by one teammate. Of course, they're all expecting me to take this seriously. Meanwhile, there's a fucking toilet seat in the upper left-hand corner of my screen. Numbskulls. Oh, here's a great spot. So Rhea's supposed to be selling a facial injury, correct? She allegedly got her orbital bone broken during a brawl with the heels on television at one point. So Rhea takes off her protective mask when she sees Liv get into the ring with a baseball bat. Because she's smart. And then moments later, the heels restrain Rhea and leave her entirely exposed for Liv to hit her. Guess where Liv struck Rhea with the baseball bat? Her rib cage. I can't. So, of course, the spot that everybody's probably going to look back on and say was the highlight, even though I'd refer to it more so as a low light. The cough stereo dives off the top of the cage with Tiffany and Io. Of course, Io had the garbage can over her body when she did the moonsault. Because she did it last year and the people went ballistic for it. So we have to try to replicate it a year later and think it'll get the same response. And of course, the whole thing looks visually ridiculous because everybody's just standing around the ring for like 5 minutes waiting for everybody to get in place. So everybody just looks stupid by the end. Cooperative scripted stunt routines. That's all this bullshit is anymore. So, more stuff happened here. People went through tables. People got hit over the head with garbage can lids. At one point, Tiffany teased cashing in her Money in the Bank briefcase after she hid it inside one of the garbage cans. Because that wasn't clearly pre-planned. And, I don't know what else happened. I left the room to collect my thoughts momentarily since I just witnessed one of the worst matches I've ever seen. And when I came back in the room, Liv had been put through a table by Rhea and pinned. So at least the right fucking team won. Yeah, we're really grasping at straws now, aren't we? Horrible match. Absolutely god-awful. And no, for the record, it wasn't just because they were women. The human anatomy had nothing to do with how bad this was. It was a garbage wrestling match with garbage booking and garbage agenting. I hate the way these matches are laid out, dude. It's the same fucking shit every year. You know, while I'm on my soapbox here, I may as well rant about this for a few minutes. Far be it for me to come to the defense of Tony Khan. People give him shit for lazy booking. Triple H ain't exactly a booking godsend. He's not reinventing the wheel with his played-out concepts. You think he'd try to play a new tune every so often, instead of reverting back to the same old lazy formula for every god-blessed fucking Wargames match. But I guess I'd be giving him too much credit for thought. So after that catastrophe they spawned on the human population, it was going to take a miracle for me to want to get into Shinsuke Nakamura and LA Knight for the US title. And that is already taken into account that I kind of dug Nakamura's new look. The new theme music is kind of whatever. But I dig the new heel persona. It's kind of a more updated Kabuki look with the face paint and the long hair shielding his eyes. I'm sure at some point we'll be seeing him break out the mist spot. So, there's at least potential for them to do something cool with it. I've always been a fan of Nakamura. It's no secret he's been booked like shit in WWE for years. And the running gag with him is that he likes to spend more time surfing on the beach than he does actually showing up to wrestle. Usually because the booking team doesn't have anything for him. So, this match was always going to be a no-brainer when it came to the finish. They had already been telling the story throughout the match that Knight was off his game and not really focused like he normally is. So you could pretty much read between the lines and figure that Nakamura was winning the belt here. I even said it was probably the right call when I previewed the card the other week. You're debuting a new look. He just returned as a heel. I don't know, it'd be kind of stupid to beat him in his first match for the title, right? Hypothetically, they could have done a DQ, so Knight technically keeps the belt, but Nakamura still walks out with some heat on him. But I was more than okay with the finish here. The match, it was okay. I didn't really think the crowd ever got that into it. Maybe they kind of recognized Knight wasn't going over. They weren't happy about it. Problem was the crowd sucked all night, so it's hard to tell whether it was this specific match or just more of the same when it came to their general lackadaisical reaction to everything. LA Knight's run as champ has been so lousy, dude. And I'm as big a fan of LA Knight as anybody else. But I even remember saying last month, whatever that three-way was he had with Andrade, and I already forget the other guy that was involved. That is how unimpressive and forgettable that match was. But I even said, they may as well just take the strap off him if this is the kind of shit they're going to stick him with. These meaningless title matches with guys that nobody gives a crap about. At least with Nakamura, it's a fresher look with a guy we haven't seen on TV in a while. Overall, I didn't really have much in terms of notable spots that I jotted down. It was a pretty 50-50 match in terms of who was in control. I really don't like using the phrase, they took turns trading moves, but it's kind of what it was. Then you get the deal at the end where Knight's trying to set up for the BFT, but Nakamura rolls out to that steel grating that separates both rings. Eventually, Nakamura gives Knight a reverse DDT onto the grating. Then he hits his Kinshasa and pins him. So, there you have it. We'll see where the title reign goes. It's sad to think this is the closest LA Knight is ever going to come to actually being a world champion in WWE. But that's been the company MO for years. Give me all the hope in the world and then disappoint me when it truly counts. And yet I still come back for more punishment. Because I'm a sucker. No, it's because I'm a mark. As far as the three-way for the IC title goes, Braun Breaker, Sheamus, and Ludwig Kaiser, I'm not going to spend too long breaking this one down. I was kind of dabbling back and forth between watching this and trying to prepare my chili that I started earlier in the day. So I was sort of in and out of focus here. From a distance, kind of looked like two grown men trying to have a fight while this pre-adolescent looking teenager was gumming up the works with his constant interference. To be honest, I don't know, part of me was wondering how better this match would have been if they'd have dumped Kaiser's ass from it and just done Breaker versus Sheamus in a singles match. Because at the end of the day, Kaiser was kind of superfluous to the whole story, wasn't he? And they were talking about the story of Sheamus never having won the Intercontinental title. It's the one championship in WWE that's eluded him his entire career and prevented him from becoming a Grand Slam champ. So you could have easily just done him and Breaker for the belt and it would have accomplished the same story. I don't know what the hell Kaiser had to do with any of this. I guess the one benefit of having him in there is that since he was the smaller of the three guys, he could sell the shit out of Breaker and Sheamus's offense. I love that flying shoulder tackle spot that Breaker gave him earlier on. Cole said it looked like a flying missile coming through the air. Trust me, I've seen plenty of footage of missiles coming down. Breaker was a lot faster than your average everyday missile. Russia wishes they had that kind of speed to their missile arsenal. I mean, Breaker was the star of the whole match. Every big moment that happened with him was, I'm just going to dive in from off camera somewhere and flatten over everybody. And it was awesome. I know I kind of dismissed the idea of the three-way concept when I read this on the wiki page. Because immediately I was like, my God, another fucking three-way? Seriously? To be fair, there were a couple good moments here. Not enough to really justify me wanting to sit through another multi-man match. But especially as things heated up toward the end, they were milking the false finishes with Sheamus coming within a hair's reach of getting the pinfall. And that's when the people actually started getting into the match a little bit. Because duh, right? They're just spamming false finishes. Of course the people are going to pop. It's the only thing they've been conditioned to give a shit about. Near falls and big impactful moments. But they do the spot on the floor where Kaiser's beating Sheamus all over the place with a shillelagh. By the way, I actually had to look up the spelling of shillelagh because I could not figure it out. There is an H in the word shillelagh, believe it or not. Never would have guessed. So yeah, Sheamus has the welts and the bruises all over his body. Kind of hindered his ability to hit any of the big power moves because his body kept giving out on him. So right as Kaiser thinks he has the match in the bag, Breaker comes in from out of nowhere and spears the shit out of him. Again, going back to the theme of the match, Breaker out of nowhere. He's going to become his own meme. He's going to steal Randy Orton's old gimmick. That's what he's going to do. So after he disposes of Kaiser, he milks the final spear on Sheamus and ends up getting the pinfall. And the finishing sequence was pretty good. And like I said, there were moments here where I was paying attention and kind of enjoying it. But again, it was very off and on. And I still hate the idea that multi-mans are just status quo when it comes to WWE booking anymore. Again, to me, it's just lazy. It's a lame excuse for them to just cram in more unwanted bodies on a card. I'm not even saying they shouldn't try to push Ludwig Kaiser, but he just looked like a total outcast when you compare him to the other two here. All those years he spent being Gunther's flunky, and all of a sudden they want me to take him seriously. What was his name before they changed it to Kaiser? Wasn't it like Ichabod Slim? Or maybe that was his partner, Fabio. Whatever happened to that guy? The other Gunther patsy. Is he still around? Well, speaking of the handsome devil, that brought us to Gunther and Damian Priest for the World Heavyweight title. Here's an interesting little factoid. Gunther is apparently 40-3 when it comes to his win-loss record since 2022. 2 of those losses he suffered just with this past year. I mean, you want to talk about win-loss records actually meaning something. That's a record that'll catch your eye. And that is the thing that sets Gunther apart from a lot of the other guys on the main roster. The fact that he rarely loses and is actually presented like a main event attraction. So, I believe these two have history, correct? Gunther was the one that beat Priest for the belt, as I remember. I was just confused because they said Priest won a 4-way to qualify for this spot or something like that. So, immediately I was like, oh, great. Another meaningless Challenger of the Month story. But then I remembered, no, wait. Priest and Gunther already had a match earlier this year for the belt. It was SummerSlam, wasn't it? I like how I just don't remember shit that happened 2 or 3 months ago. I remember stuff that happened on Crockett Television from over 2 years back. But I can't remember jack shit about what happened on WWE on a Big 4 pay-per-view 3 months ago. It just shows how much of a lack of interest there is in the product for me. At the same time, I don't think anybody ever really thought Priest was winning this match. It was a good title match, though. It's not going to win any Match of the Year candidates or anything, but it was a classic old-school babyface heel title match. You had the heel targeting the injured body part of the babyface who started favoring it earlier. In this case, it was Priest's left shoulder. Again, the crowd sucked all night, so they really didn't do the comeback any justice, and or trying to rally behind Priest at any point. The one thing I actually appreciated about them working the arm injury throughout this match is that Priest actually worked it. Everything registered, including the impact of all the power moves. He would hit something and then he'd momentarily favor the shoulder so that he couldn't immediately capitalize on a pinfall, or he'd strategically cover up his shoulder so he didn't always have his full weight capacity over Gunther. Just small little details that make a world of difference. Especially these days in wrestling when there's plenty more to bitch about than there is to positively critique. The finish I thought was kind of lame. You do that huge setup where both guys are teetering on the top rope. They both end up taking a bump. And while Gunther's down in the ring and the ref's checking on him, Priest is down on the floor selling the shoulder again. Also, that way Finn Balor can run in from out of nowhere and give him the double foot stomp off the ring steps. I mean, at first I didn't even register it was Balor. I just thought it was some mark that jumped the barricade. I saw this scrawny-looking dweeb in an oversized t-shirt and thought, why isn't security making a rush to tackle this guy? Oh, wait a minute. It's Finn. Never mind. So, yeah, I guess that feud's continuing. Like, the funniest part about Balor interfering is that when Gunther saw he was on the floor, he just went out and punted Balor right in the face. That I actually got a kick out of. Balor was such a geek, he still gets his comeuppance for trying to help out the other guy. Again, nobody ever suspected Priest was winning this match. I think the bloom's kind of off the rose with that run. Which is unfortunate too, because I even remember saying, going back to when he finally dropped the belt to Gunther, okay, so you're going to have him feud with the Judgment Day crew, and then what? He beat Balor, I remember that. Didn't he, yeah, he and Rhea beat Dom and Liv in a mixed tag, too. So, okay, he's already beaten the core members of the original Judgment Day. Carlito and JD McDonough, we don't talk about those two dorks. So what's left for them to revisit in this feud? The babyface has already gotten his revenge multiple times over. Shouldn't he be done with all this now? I mean, I guess the only logical next step would be for him to find a partner to go after Balor and McDonough for the tag belts. But even that's going to seem like a major downgrade compared to everything Priest has done previously. So I don't know. Not really all too intrigued with seeing Priest continue to feud with Balor and the rest of the Judgment Day. I think he needs to detach himself from that group and get as far away from them as humanly possible. And as for Gunther, shit, hell if I know what you do with him next. Who's left on Raw for him to beef with over the belt? He's already beaten Priest twice. McIntyre's off TV right now, and he's still a heel. So that wouldn't really make any sense. I mean, I guess there's always Rollins, but who the fuck wants to see that? Not me. I don't know. I mean, unless they're going to start flipping guys on SmackDown and completely negate the whole concept of the brand split, it's probably their only option at this point. I don't think CM Punk's a guy you want to put in that predicament right now. Because if he's not going to beat Gunther for the belt, there's no point. And I don't really think Punk needs a world title right now. I mean, my assumption is they're going to save that spot for somebody like a Braun Breaker after they're ready to have him drop the IC title. Where and when that would be? It's a good question. Guess it all kind of depends on who they have ready to take Braun's spot. So nobody, in other words. Good, so we've established that. Guess we can move on to the main event now. It is time for Wargames. Even though we've already seen a Wargames match earlier in the show, but this time it counts. I appreciated the poor attempt at lampooning the old Key and Peele Pro Ball skits. I was totally expecting Sami Zayn to be the comedic relief. The only thing we got was him saying he was a graduate of the Uso Penitentiary. It's a damn shame we didn't get a cameo from Bismo Funyuns here. Or my personal favorite of the group, X-Mix, Jackson, Flax, and Waxon. They should have all just gone in with a fucking parody. Start having guys dress up in different outfits and do all the ridiculous names. Would have been highly more entertaining than the actual Wargames match itself. I'm partially kidding on that. So, just in case I never actually established who was part of this Bloodline versus Bloodline Wargames deal, it is Solo Sikoa, Tama Tonga, Tonga Loa, Jacob Fatu, and Bronson Reed. Because Bronson's just an honorary member of the Bloodline all of a sudden, since he shares that Samoan heritage, despite being Australian. And they wrestled the other Bloodline group of Roman Reigns, the Usos, Sami Zayn, and CM Punk. And at least they managed to get the team advantage situation correct this time. And I will at least say up front, while I still don't entirely agree with the idea that they needed to have a Bloodline Wargames match, period, at least you could create a story reason in your head for justifying it. Well, with the girls, there's no rationalizing anything that happened in that bullshit match. I guess here's my biggest qualm with this match specifically. What did either team get out of this match by winning? Was there ever a stipulation added that the winning team would win the sole rights to the Bloodline name? Or like the winning team would get to proclaim their team captain as tribal chief? The sole custody of the Bloodline brand? Like, I know that might all seem juvenile if you're looking at it on paper, but I mean, did it really truly matter which team won this match? I mean, the announcers kept saying it's a must-win situation for Roman. Why? Like, what did he, or his team more specifically, get out of winning this match? Justice for everything Solo did to them earlier this year? Okay, well then the problem becomes, well, what the hell did CM Punk have to do with any of this? You see what I mean? They're just small little pieces here that don't entirely connect to the puzzle. Why wasn't Cody involved? Wasn't he a bigger part of this than Punk ever was? I would argue he had more of a reason to be in this match than Punk did. Is it because Cody's more focused on the stuff with Kevin Owens? Like I said, just some of the dots weren't connecting here. Now, that said, I love the stuff they did with Roman and Punk throughout the match. How it took them through pretty much the entire journey of the match to finally get on the same page and not view each other as adversaries. And I guess that was kind of the selling point going in, that Punk and Reigns didn't like each other. They didn't want to be partners, but they're doing it for the greater good, i.e. Paul Heyman. So when you had the early moment where Punk tried to lead the Shark Cage to join the match, but Reigns blocked his path and told Sammy to go instead, and you get that long, dramatic stare down where Punk's just glaring a hole through Roman the whole time. And like Roman's totally no-selling in, standing there with his hands crossed. That was hilarious, for one. But it also helped to keep the tension up. I have to say this right now, otherwise I'll forget. One of my favorite moments in the entire match. Whoever timed this in the crowd is a fucking genius. I don't even know how this guy instinctually knew, but they were about to start the countdown for the next heel entry after Reed and Tama Tonga were in the ring with the Usos. I think he just figured it was going to be Tonga Loa. So right as the crowd was dying down momentarily, you just hear one fan in the crowd scream, "Tonga Loa sucks!" And then I think literally just to swerve the people, instead of Tonga Loa leaving the cage next, which he was clearly set up to do, they sent out Jacob Fatu instead. And the crowd popped. They were like, oh, thank God. We can prolong having to watch Tonga Loa get involved for a bit longer. Oh, by the way, you can absolutely copy and paste every gripe I made earlier about the use of weapons in the Wargames matches. The fact that none of the officials try to stop the talent from bringing shit into the ring. They just let it happen. Well, to be fair, if I had to choose between stirring up a confrontation with girls or large, scary-looking Samoans, I'll pick the fight with the girls any day of the week. I can take Candice LeRae in a fight. I can't take Jacob Fatu. Nor would I want to, especially given the criminal record. So, I mean, to be honest, there really wasn't much going on in the pre-war game stuff to really track here. Or I guess the proper term would be the match beyond. I don't know if they're allowed to use that term. The other big highlight with Punk and Reigns was after Reigns had stopped Punk from entering the cage earlier. When it came down to just those two, it looked like Reigns was going to enter next. And you see Punk kind of standing there with his arms crossed, teasing he was going to let Reigns go. And then Punk just cut him off and left Reigns standing there like a jackass. And you see Reigns looking on like, you motherfucker. Again, all the stuff with Punk and Reigns here was great. I don't want to discount any of that. I'm still at the point with Punk where I cringe anytime I see him in these barbaric kinds of environments. I guess the benefit to have him involved in war games is that he doesn't have to do too much other than take the occasional bump or have his moment of shine. It is kind of ironic, though, isn't it? The last two matches Punk worked, they've both been cage matches. So, I mean, more of the story aspect kicked in once they all got in the cage and the match proper began. You had the great visual where Roman's helping up all his teammates, but he walks around Punk because they still hate each other by this point. And then Paul Heyman comes down the aisleway and has to be the voice of reason to get them to finally put their heads together and be cohesive. For the bloodline! And so everybody's in there doing their spots. There was another miscue where Roman accidentally speared Punk when he had up one of the heels in a GTS. By this point, I was like, okay, I think we get it, guys. They don't have chemistry. You don't have to force it down our throats that much. A pretty scary moment at one point where Fatu went up and slipped on the top turnbuckle trying to do his moonsault. And like the thing is, he came down selling his knee immediately. So my instinct was like, oh, well, he's fucked. But then I remember the last time he did a dive through the announce table and started favoring his knee. Turns out he was working the injury the whole time. So I don't know. Maybe he was just selling here to give the illusion he was hurt. Well, we did have the turning point in the 5-part series of CM Punk and Roman Reigns hate each other saga. One massive force brought them together this evening. And that force was in the form of Bronson Reed teasing a splash off the top of the cage onto Roman. And when Punk saw the situation, he said, for the bloodline. And you get that epic photo finish where Bronson's coming down off the top of the cage, barely misses Roman on the way down. Like, you watch that replay, Punk barely got Roman out of the way in time. It was like, And it was close enough to make your balls shrivel up. So Roman finally extended the peace offering, which was kind of short-lived, because then the heels jumped Roman and Punk again and started beating him up. But at least we established they're on the same page now. Or they're at least willing to take a bullet for the other. And some other stuff happened. Jimmy Uso did a dive off the cage onto somebody. By the way, you notice how none of those cage dives actually ever led to the finish? Just saying. So with all the heels down, it's Solo in there basically fighting for himself. He was in fact solo in his efforts to defend his team. And so the babyfaces took turns hitting their big moves on Solo. Punk gave him the GTS and then let Roman pick the scraps. Spear, 1, 2, 3. Roman's bloodline wins. Again, what do they win exactly, aside from bragging rights? I don't think anything. But to be honest, that wasn't even really the central story after everything was over. The bigger story was the face-off between Punk and Reigns. And it took some inner work amongst the teammates, but they managed to get Punk and Reigns to finally see eye to eye. At least, it would seem that way. Again, you have to remember, Punk said he was not doing any of this for Roman. He was doing it for Paul. And that Paul would owe him one afterwards. So that kind of gets your gears turning a little bit when you see the visuals, like all the Bloodline members throwing up the one sign at the very end of the show, but Punk is the lone wolf standing with the group doing the go to sleep sign. So, do you read into that as something more than Punk just being Punk? Or does he have an ulterior motive? It's good foreshadowing for sure. I mean, overall, it's one of those things where I like some of the story aspect of what they were trying to do in this match. The problem, though, is that it was all happening inside the confines of an overplayed, overdone gimmick concept that doesn't really have any kind of market appeal in 2024. I mean, if people can rationally explain to me why this exact same match with the exact same talent couldn't have just been a standard 5-on-5 elimination tag, I'm all ears. But I don't think you're going to come up with a good explanation. I think Wargames is a tired concept that needs to go away. They need to can it like they did with the Hell in a Cell PLE. If you absolutely need to do a Wargames match, you save it for when it really counts. You know, just make it an annual thing where everybody's already expecting it. Because then it's just another match. It's not an attraction anymore. But what do I know? I mean, I've been saying the same shit on this channel for 3 years now, and nobody pays attention to my opinion. So I guess it doesn't matter. But those are my thoughts on Survivor Series. It was a survival to get through it. I mean, nothing on this show gave me high hopes for anything that's going to happen in Rumble season come January. I mean, nothing really caught my eye for where they might be taking things headed into Mania season. The most we got was whatever they were teasing with Punk and Reigns, which may turn out not to be anything in the grand scheme of things. We'll have to wait and see. But that women's Wargames, holy shit, that women's Wargames, dude. That was legit one of the worst matches I've seen in a long time. Worse than any girls' match I've ever covered in AEW. No question. If you were going to watch something purely for the train wreck factor on this show, Boy, do I have the match for you. Nia fucking Jax, dude. She is so bad. So fucking awful. I love reading all these idiotic comments people post about her improving and getting better. The only thing she's gotten better at is knowing how to pick her samples at the buffet bar. But hey, big is beautiful, right? That's what I hear the mainstream media preaching these days. So y'all ready to move on to Retro Raw? I know I am. So I actually did this last week when we talked about the fallout to the concussion angle with Shawn. And I broke out the old ratings table just to see if it gave Raw a bit of an edge for the following week. As we came to learn, they still lost to Nitro in the ratings. But in keeping with the theme of doing some of these comparison numbers, since we're still in that pre-83 weeks era, the numbers between both programs are still very much neck and neck, right up until about early summer of '96. And there's a very interesting pattern that we're about to see develop between Raw and Nitro from now until, I think it was May 20th, when I previewed the table earlier. Both programs essentially trade victories in the ratings cycle on 2 or 3 weeks. And granted, it's not a 50-50 back and forth trade where Raw wins 2 weeks in a row and then Nitro bounces back and wins 2 weeks in a row and it just kind of repeats on that pattern. But, I mean, there's not really any form of consistency to how these numbers fluctuate between both brands. This is how close things were. Even when you go back and look at when you got this new hot show counter-programming the main flagship show that Vince has been running for the past 2 years. And again, a lot of that had to do with what Nitro was airing even around this time. Yeah, they had star power and yeah, they had great wrestling action for the most part. But holy fuck did the booking suck. And that's probably the best model you can use if you're going to try to prove why great in-ring action doesn't always equate to successful programming or generated interest. I mean, you could book as many dream matches as you want. Doesn't mean people are going to naturally flock to want to watch your show. Especially when none of the matches mean a goddamn thing. Seriously, dude, you don't believe me? Go watch a lot of those early Nitros from around this time. They were not the glory period people often remember. And it's not to say Raw was any better, because these shows suck too by and large. I've been documenting that for the last 12 fucking months. The Monday Night Wars, people. 2024 retrospective for you. So, I don't even know if I mentioned this. So, Raw beat Nitro this week. A 2.6 victory over Nitro's 2.4. So we are literally comparing apples to apples here. I mean, it's not like one product was clearly superseding the other. Frankly, I don't know how Raw beat Nitro when you look at some of the structure of this show. Something must have been really appealing about that Sid Vicious-Marty Jannetty match. Either that or people really wanted to see Sparkplug Bob Holly wrestle. Because there's a needle mover right there. Stay with us, ladies and gentlemen. Don't switch channels to Nitro. We've got Sparkplug Bob Holly in action. He took on Davey Boy in the opener this week. Keep in mind, Davey is about to wrestle Bret Hart in the main event of In Your House for the WWF title. And he's out there struggling to beat Bob fucking Holly in a standalone wrestling match. And there's really not much to note about this aside from Bulldog going over with a power slam. I mean, the announcers were more fixated on the topic of Bob Backlund, who, if you remember last week, randomly showed up during a Bret Hart interview with Brother Love. So that way he could put the chicken wing hold on Bret and I guess remind the people that they still have unfinished business that from shit that dates all the way back to WrestleMania. A match I think a lot of us would have liked to forget ever happened. So, well, now apparently Backlund's been going around slapping the chicken wing on a bunch of random people, including Jim Ross, because any opportunity they had to humiliate JR in the WWF, you knew they wouldn't hesitate. So that led to this ringside interview with Lawler, and what an interview it was. So next week, Backlund is going to be wrestling Bret in a non-title match on TV, which apparently was news to Backlund. He just outright assumed it was going to be a title match. So the minute Lawler mentions to Backlund that it's going to be non-title, the mood immediately shifts on a dime. Now Backlund's fucking pissed. No! I had dreams! That was an exact quote from Backlund. I'm not making that up. Like, the whole thing is hysterical because aside from the hideously appalling acting going on, nobody in this crowd gave a shit. You know, Backlund's out there hollering and ranting and screaming about God knows what. Meanwhile, you got people standing like 2 feet behind him just openly laughing at this fucking lunatic. Nobody's in fear for their lives. Nobody's panicking that Backlund's going to run around and start putting harmless bystanders in the chicken wing. He's being the wacky Bob Backlund of 1995 that everybody kind of got used to around this time. No one actually believes he's a dangerous shrill going around threatening to hurt innocent people. He's not the fucking Sheik. Or Abdullah the Butcher. He's just a normal white guy with a bad gimmick with horrible acting ability. So this segment is dying a rancid death. And they keep trying to cut him off so they can pitch to a commercial break, but Backlund keeps talking over everybody. So eventually they just cut his mic and fade to black. Y'all excited to see Bret Hart versus Bob Backlund on Raw next week? I sure know I'm not. So as we go back to the ring for Fatu versus the Brooklyn Brawler, we also learned that Backlund was on the hunt for the sound technician that was responsible for cutting his mic earlier. So, I mean, they called the cops, right? Or at least attempted to organize security to protect this guy. I mean, Vince was so passive about it, he essentially may as well have just said, well, sucks to be that guy. I'm sure he'll be dead before the end of the night. Spoiler. Backlund found him and killed him. No security to be found. They just let it happen. So Fatu beat Lombardi here with a splash in about 60 seconds. The back of Fatu's ring jacket read, and I quote, "It's time to make a change." Fully concur with that notion. It is indeed time for a gimmick change. I repeat what I said earlier. Raw beat Nitro this week in the ratings. So far, we've had 15 minutes go by, and the only thing of substance we've seen is Bob Backlund's repulsive acting. So what the hell was Nitro doing on the other channel? That's what I want to know. I'm not about to look it up. I don't care all that much. And that brought us to Razor Ramon and Dean Douglas for the Intercontinental title. What they billed as a proper rematch of sorts. The last time these two wrestled, it was back at In Your House 4 after Shawn had relinquished the belt to management. And then Douglas was handed the belt on a forfeit. But then he had to wrestle Razor in the same segment, and well, we all remember how that went. Douglas was IC champion for approximately 9 minutes, or however long the match was. So this was Douglas's chance at a fair shake, since he actually had time to prepare ahead of time. I mean, it was highly more competitive than the first match they had, meaning that Douglas actually got in some offense on Razor occasionally. They went to break with Douglas fully in control of things. And when they came back, Razor started firing his comeback on Douglas. And then he just hit him with a razor's edge and pinned him. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, wait a minute. You have to be glossing over something, right? There's no way it was that simple. Oh, but it was. Shane Douglas was emphatically beaten here. No questions asked. And it was such an unremarkable match, I forgot about virtually everything the minute it was over. Kind of like how most of us forgot all about Dean Douglas the minute this match was over. Which may have been deliberate. And the bangers just keep on coming this week. Telling you, man, if there's one thing Raw really needed at this point, after everything we'd seen up to now, it was King Mabel doing an interview segment with Brother Love. Okay, now I really need to see what the fuck was happening on Nitro that caused people to want to check out this show instead. Seriously, how did this beat Nitro in the ratings? This fucking thing. All right, hang on. I'm now pulling up the results page for the December 4th episode of Nitro. I was kidding before, but now I'm actually serious. There's absolutely no way this wasn't the most rotten program of all time. To think people would have rather watched Mabel do a long-winded promo with Brother Love than watch anything that was happening on Nitro around this time. It's almost unthinkable. So... shit. And there's going to be like 50 different pages for this. I'm just going to go to the Pro Wiki page or whatever it's called. The Wrestling Wiki page. I mean, it's only going to be sharing the results of the matches. I don't think there's any promos or interview segments they conducted here. So we had Harlem Heat defeating the American Males to retain the WCW tag titles. Sting beat Kurosawa in 3 minutes. The Giant beat Scott Norton by DQ. Actually, that sounds pretty amazing. I want to go watch that. And Lex Luger beat Randy Savage by DQ in the main event. I guess Savage was the World Heavyweight Champion around this time, so he kept the title as a result. So yeah, that show lost to Raw this week. They lost to Fatu versus the Brooklyn Brawler. Spark Plug Holly versus the British Bulldog. And I guess whatever in the hell this segment was supposed to be. A featured Mabel promo. Given time. I mean, I knew the segment was doomed the minute Mabel fucked up his first line. Because, well, it's not really a newfound concept, but Mabel sucked at promos. This segment was really bad. I mean, the whole thing was supposed to be a giant swerve at the end. That they're trying to get you to buy that Brother Love and Mabel are working on opposite sides. When it turns out they were actually in cahoots the whole time. I mean, they're out there droning on and on for a month and a half. Just, and they're saying nothing of substance. It's insufferable back and forth dialogue. I hate everything about Brother Love. And it only gets worse and worse every time I have to mention it. Basically, here's all you need to know. Mabel is wrestling Taker in a casket match at In Your House. Because of course he is. That's Taker's gimmick throughout professional wrestling in the 90s. Wrestling the biggest, largest men with no athletic ability and then trying to get something feasible out of it. And they do the whole thing where Brother Love bestows upon Mabel a gift. And they milk the deal where you see the giant casket being rolled down to the ring by one of the Druids. I guess we're intended to believe it was Taker, either in the casket or under the Druid hood. Turns out it was actually Mo. And that is where they revealed the giant casket with the graffiti that reads, "Rest in peace, Taker." Making it apparent that Bruce was on Mabel's side the whole time. Of course, the actual reveal of the casket got over like a wet fart. Because you could barely see the fucking thing to begin with. It was like trying to pick out a hooded figure in a dark parking lot. And, oh yeah, did I mention it's Taker versus Mabel in a casket match? Yeah, that sounds downright abhorrent. Glad they're booking it on pay-per-view so people had to pay to see it. And then we had the main event, Sid versus Marty Jannetty, which they had set up last week when Sid powerbombed Marty on the floor following a confrontation with the 1-2-3 Kid. I love watching Sid in this match. He was so over it, dude. He did not give a shit. Like, he's out there going through the motions and just doing the bare minimum to get by. There was a spot in the first several minutes where he shoots Jannetty off into the corner. And when Sid goes to charge, Jannetty gets his feet up. Sid sells it by making a completely over-the-top, goofy facial expression right in front of the hard cam. And then subsequently turning around and standing in prone position so Jannetty can hit him with a senton DDT. He just... I mean, he all but said, "All right, dude, I'm in position for you. Go ahead and hit your move. Because we're cooperating together." And like, I mean, the thing with Sid, he's always been a big lumbering guy to begin with. He's always had that Frankenstein-like nature to everything he does, especially selling, which is sort of his charm. But when you factor in the moments of his career where you could tell he clearly did not give a shit, God, it makes everything so much better. So this whole thing was basically me having fun at Sid's expense. Like the minute the 1-2-3 kid came out and started running interference, you could pretty much write off everything that happened afterwards. I just like how the ref clearly saw the kid beating on Jannetty on the floor. That was not a DQ. But when Razor hit the ring and everybody got involved, well, then the match got thrown out. And so Razor's giving chase to the kid through the audience. They both just vanished and were never seen again. Meanwhile, Sid gives Jannetty a jackknife powerbomb in the ring for no reason, just to get the last laugh. Oh yeah, speaking of groundbreaking pay-per-view matches that nobody in their right mind wants to see, how about this one? Razor and Jannetty versus the 1-2-3 Kid and Psycho Sid. A Raw TV main event if there ever was one. Let's book it on pay-per-view, pal. That'll be such good shit. You know, the funny thing is it's probably significantly better than that fucking casket match with Taker and Mabel. And I'm willing to put money on it. So before we rounded out the show, it took a few minutes to update us on the status of Shawn's health, since it has been 2 weeks since the concussion angle. And like, I mean, I know I'm supposed to take it all seriously and treat it like a big deal, but I'm sorry. The minute Shawn's physician is on camera with a straight face talking about how he was watching Raw with his wife when he saw everything go down, I'm like, dude, you're fucking 50. You were just casually watching Monday Night Raw with your wife? She had to divorce him after this, right? There's no way she stuck around. Her reputation was tarnished the minute this guy spilled the beans. So they basically go into this long diatribe about how Shawn's not really recovering from the head injury like the physician would like. You know, it's too early to determine whether or not Shawn will even be medically cleared to ever get back in a ring, period. Much less being cleared to wrestle another match. And like that part I could at least buy as a credible storyline rationale for writing Shawn off television. I mean, I'm pretty sure the guy was a legit physician, so he at least sounded authentic with what he was saying here. Fuck, man. God, when they aired that 2-minute clip at the end with Vince going into his Hollywood-esque scripted dialogue, you know, talking about how professional wrestlers are these larger-than-life personas that common, ordinary people often mistake as indestructible. And you got the somber Family Matters violin music playing in the backdrop. I'm like, well, now they just turned the whole thing into a bad TV series parody. I was willing to buy the physician VTR, but now they just gone and turned this into bad sports entertainment drama. Like, I just love the whole idea here that they're actually trying to convince people that Shawn's retiring from wrestling, or that his in-ring career may be over forever. It's like, did anybody actually buy that horse shit? And or the other 15 times they tried to revisit this story over the next 3 years? Come on. Nobody actually thought Shawn's wrestling career was over. Like, none of this did a great job getting me to sympathize for Shawn. just made me laugh at Vince's poor attempts at thinking he's Mel Blanc. I mean, in essence, kind of was the central story of Raw this week. You had to wait until the last 5 minutes to see any of it. But at least we got some clarity on the gravity of Shawn's concussion storyline. I mean, it was, in all fairness, one of the more serious things they aired. It was better than Bob Backlund's painful performance. I don't know, there's always that lull period at the end of the year during the holiday season where the WWF kind of knows people aren't watching all that religiously. They usually don't go above and beyond with the December period. I still can't believe this show managed to beat Nitro. But this was most definitely a forgettable, dry end-of-the-year wrestling program. The mere fact that Mabel got a featured promo segment this week should tell you everything you need to know. But that'll round out this show here. And as always, appreciate the people that come back to check out the podcast every week. We will be back this coming Friday for the Classic Series shows. And again, just to kind of restate what I talked about last week in case you missed, we will not be covering the next episode of Crockett on the Superstation. We'll actually be doing the Clash of Champions review. So that'll take place as the substitute for Superstars in the Superstation, just for this 1 week, though. So I hope you're all looking forward to that. In the meantime, we'll catch you guys on Friday, and y'all take care. Peace out.